On BaylorMotel.com, the Republican candidate for governor.
Have sexual relations.
And I realize that this is something he is
We're not going to be able to solve our problems if we get distracted by sideshows and carnival barkers.
One Republican, one Democrat, and you discuss the issues that matter in today's local, state, national, and global politics. Hosted by Steve Hickson with co-hosts John Stanberry and Franklin Chansey. This is Backfire.
Have you heard about the news about ESPN suspending Jameel Hill?
I think it's outrageous. First of all, Jameel Hill and anyone else has the right to express their views. To try and silence her will not silence many of us that feel what Jerry Jones has done is put the Cowboy players in a position of either I must sell my right to express my feelings, my freedom of speech, my right to protest in order to do my trade and do my business. That is, in my opinion, disrespecting what the flag's supposed to stand for. We're supposed to be a country where the First Amendment gives you freedom of speech. So he's saying if you want to play on my team, you suspend your freedom of speech, your right to protest. ESPN is saying if Jamil says, well, the advertisers ought to know your feelings, then she's going to be silenced and suspended. She did not tell them to boycott. She said let the advertisers know how you feel. Now, I'm calling a meeting of civil rights leaders. We do call for boycotts, and we may very well do it. So if Jerry Jones and
Oh, right. ESPN's in trouble. What do you think, guys?
ESPN's in trouble?
I think they are.
Ratings-wise.
Okay.
Do you think that?
Well, I mean, I'll just say ESPN walked away with ratings that were 17% lower than Monday Night Football game just the week before. So they had a 17% decrease in viewership in 1 week.
Explain how much 17% is, John.
I'm sure that's millions and millions.
Yeah, what caused the decrease, you think?
Well, I think President Trump caused it. I think that the public is on his side and that they've grossly misplayed this.
What's the girl's name that the announcer, the black
Jameel Hill.
Jameel Hill. You don't think she had anything to do with it?
Well, I think all of ESPN has been notoriously political. I mean, they're too political for a political TV station, and they're not a political station. They're a sports station. And, you know, this isn't even a Republican or Democrat thing per se. People want to watch football. They want to be able to escape some of this, and they don't want, as typical for the liberals, they don't want stuff crammed down their throat, especially when they're trying to watch a football game.
You know, I think we're about to get this worked up with taking a knee.
Well, it was already worked out. It's been illegal. It's been in their rule book that they're not allowed to do it.
But they haven't been upholding that
rule.
Yeah,
they have enforced that rule. The guy that wanted to wear a cross and pray in the end zone, they enforced. The Dallas Cowboys, when they wanted to wear stickers on their helmet, basically honoring the 5 policemen that were gunned down, it was enforced, and they were told no. But if you want to say the United States of America sucks, they allowed you to do that.
Anyway, the announcer, I mean, she came out, and then she told, after the Dallas Cowboys owner, Jerry Jones made his announcement that his players would stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Then she comes out and says that everybody needs to quit buying products that support the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, it's like ESPN suspends her for 2 weeks. Why would they fire her? She called our president a white supremacist.
Well, that's the real question. She called him a white supremacist, which is slander with no proof, no connection to that. And they didn't do anything to her. But when she threatened their revenue stream, then they punished her.
2 weeks. I mean,
we don't even know whether it's paid or unpaid.
Well, that's right. But, I mean, do you think she ought to have been fired?
I think ESPN's going to make a business decision, and that's all it is. ESPN's not a journalism outfit. Although John says people just want to watch football, the majority of their programming is opinion shows.
On football, on sports, not politics.
I don't know how you get to the point that that's not an issue related to football at this time.
It's only an issue related to football because football players who are spoiled multimillionaire brats are forcing the issue. They made it the issue instead of just playing football.
Well, exactly which one of those people who weren't rich would you be paying any attention to if they were talking?
Plenty of people. Franklin,
who is that be, John?
No, Franklin, those people.
No, here's the
Well, let me ask you a
problem.
question. How many of those people go to Hollywood premieres? How many of them get on sports shows? How many of them get on all kinds of TV shows? They have all kinds of forums to do anything they want to do, and millions of people would listen to them because they idolize them.
Why don't they put their money where their mouths are?
I think they are.
What are they doing?
Several of them have lost endorsements over it.
No, why don't they donate their millions of dollars to these causes?
Why don't they set up a foundation to help these projects?
How many of them went to Chicago to stop the murder of young black men in Chicago at a momentous rate that's going on? How many talked about that?
Al Sharpton's butting in now. Al Sharpton's butting in. Did he ever pay his tax bill?
No, he still owes over $5 million.
Why don't we just declare his $5 million and let it be paid to a fund to help these poor people?
Because it'd come out of our pockets.
Well, that's all right. I'd rather do that as not be paid at all. He's not paying it. Why is he not being forced to pay it?
Because he's Al Sharpton, and you're a racist if you expect him to pay his taxes.
Franklin, what is the deal there?
With which issue?
Well, let's start with Al Sharpton. Why won't he pay his tax bill? Because he doesn't have to?
I suppose he hasn't been prosecuted yet. That will ultimately happen. I hate to tell you this, but that's the same rules that apply to everybody else, too. The government doesn't start prosecuting very quickly.
They found thousands of IRS employees who owed back taxes.
Oh, Lord, this is messed up as the veterans hospitals, I guess, isn't it? Well, I hope we get our tax forms done
and by the way,
on a postcard now. We can fill out.
Let me say one other thing about these guys. They have a constitutional right. They don't have a constitutional right during the game to do that. That is a paid performance. That'd be like Mark Ruffalo, who's a big global warming liberal idiot, in the middle of the next Avengers movie, turning to the screen and going, "Hey, hang on a minute, guys. Let me talk to you about global warming." You think anybody would allow Mark Ruffalo to cut that into the middle of the Avengers movie? Or will they just allow the movie to be the entertainment it's supposed to be? And while we're talking about it, Franklin, the NFL gets billions of dollars in taxpayer money. They are subsidized to the tune of billions of dollars. They owe us to do their job, shut up, and play.
Why would we give them tax incentives for these new stadiums?
We're paying them to do the Pledge of Allegiance. They didn't do it until 2009, and the only reason they started doing it in 2009 is because the Obama administration, the Defense Department, started paying them to do it. So they're only patriotic because they get paid to be, and they can't even do it when they're paid.
That is part of the irony of this, is that traditionally, up until the relatively near past, these national anthem things were not part of most major American sporting events. This is a relatively new development.
They were always part of a major sporting event. They weren't part of the professional sporting events, the paid guys. You go to any football, high school, little league, and they're going to do the pledge. They always have.
I did it Friday night at Cleveland High School's game.
Mm-hmm.
It's once they start making millions of dollars and think they're better than the rest of us that they want to lecture us and hate their own country that afforded them that privilege.
I want to be paid on John's contract, though. Because clearly he's getting paid by the word, and I'm not.
By the what?
By the word.
No, we're getting paid. I'm just more efficient.
Hardly.
I just work harder at it.
Are you opposed to the Pledge of Allegiance at these ball games?
What I have said consistently is it's not a protest that I would have done, that I understand exactly why that can be hurtful to some people. But I also understand that when we say we have freedom of speech in this country, it does not mean only when we hear things that we like. And the price of having freedom of speech is that we are going to hear things that we don't like. That's what sets us apart from other countries. Now, John is correct. It's not a constitutional issue for players on the job to be told not to do something or to do something. So he's correct about that. But I don't think that some of the reactions appropriate in a free country. I mean, if everybody just said what we liked, there wouldn't be any point in having a First Amendment. We have that here.
Well, frankly, would you support the men who want to pray on the field to be allowed to pray then? Because I
see players pray after the
it's
games all the time.
It's against the rules and they get fined. If they pray, if they take a knee, when Tim Tebow was taking a knee, did any of your liberal buddies pitch a big fit and come to his defense to be allowed to pray?
I see players do that all the time.
Did anybody on the left pitch a big fit and make a big hero out of Tim Tebow?
I don't know what you're talking about. I see these players pray all the time.
So in other words, it's okay for the league to tell Tim Tebow he can't pray. It's okay for them to say you can't honor the fallen police officers, but it's not okay for them to say you have to stand for the American flag.
I didn't say they can't do that, John. I don't know why you keep imagining these words.
Saying it? That it's
my side. You don't know what my side is, first of all.
I don't think your side knows what your side is.
Should we take prayer out of school?
It hadn't been taken
Already
out of
did.
school.
You can trace back the rise in poverty.
It's not, it is.
There's nothing that prevents an individual person from praying during the school day.
But there is something that prevents the school from praying over the loudspeaker like we grew up doing.
That's right.
Because it traumatized us.
Or saying the Pledge of Allegiance in the school.
Lots of schools say the Pledge of Allegiance.
Okay.
Until the ACLU sues.
Yeah, then they have to stop.
Agree or disagree? Call and tell us. 614-5553. 614-5553.
That's a subliminal message. Anyway, I'm trying to think about when this started. I don't even remember the athlete's name that took the knee.
It's Colin Kaepernick.
And then he starts talking about he wasn't going to knee and respect America when there was
he started off just sitting down.
He wanted to wear socks that portrayed the police as pigs because that's such a respectable thing to do.
What is the deal with the police? I mean, they act like the police are just terrible, but statistically wise, they're not. So,
well, it depends on where you live.
Okay, let's say Chicago. Let's use the worst city in the country, Chicago.
First of all, I don't know the statistics there.
But
I will tell you this: there is no question about it. It's not even up for debate. All right? If you're a black male.
And you run.
In a lot of major cities, you're going to be pulled over for traffic offenses at a rate of 5 times
and
anybody else.
If a murder happens,
we're not talking about murders here, John.
But here's the problem with that. For example, you all say that profiling is racism. Okay, if you've got a description of the criminal and he's black
and he's driving a silver Cadillac,
you probably don't want to waste your time pulling over white people looking for him. Now, if you've got a criminal and he's white, you shouldn't waste your time pulling over black people. We are talking about that. These neighborhoods where you say they're more likely to be checked, it's also high crime neighborhoods that are more likely to be victimized.
It's also true if you're convicted of a crime and you happen to be black in a lot of these places, that you're likely going to get a higher sentence.
Also because of the type of crime. Now, you can make the argument.
No, I'm talking about for the same crime,
crack cocaine versus powder cocaine.
I'm talking about for the same crime as the white guy.
They shouldn't be different.
I'm talking about it as the same crime as the white guy.
And sometimes you have to look at what the past history is, what the rap sheets are on these people.
That's a different issue completely, John, and that's not the one I'm talking about.
But did you control for it?
Yes, I am.
No, you're not controlling for that.
There's not a single study out there contradicting what I just said.
Okay.
Not one.
I'll bring one in next week.
No, you're going to come in and bring things in about
so in
murders,
other words, you can bring
which is a different issue.
I'm going to come in and tell you that proportionate, for example, this latest, the Vegas shooting, a bunch of the news media said that white people are mass shooters and that white people do more of the mass shootings. And you know what? That is actually true. White people do more of the mass shootings. However, when you allot for our percentage of the population, we are actually underrepresented as mass shooters. So while they technically are telling you something that's factual, it's actually a misleading statement to make. And that's what Franklin's doing here.
No, I'm not making a misleading statement. When I can go pull records from our local government here showing stops made by various police officers, and I can pull police officers out and show you that 85% of the stops they make on the interstate are African Americans.
What's the arrest
And they
rate?
list them for traffic violations. Is it what? Do black people just drive more recklessly than white people?
Black
Is that
people
it?
commit more crimes, which is a reason they're stopped more often.
We're not talking about arrests here.
Crimes, Franklin, crimes. Police don't. Police
John, you don't get to pull people over because other people committed crimes.
Frankly,
that's
I'm
not
just
the law.
I'm just telling you that
we do have.
Do you
a
know what the
Constitution
Ferguson
for
effect
something.
is?
This was before Ferguson.
Do
John.
you know what the Ferguson effect is?
No, tell us.
The Ferguson effect is after Franklin and his people started down this road where the police are racist and we're going to sue you if you pull anybody over that turns out not to be the criminal, even though all you're trying to do is prevent crime. Crime rates, murder rates, and guess what? Murder rates among the black community skyrocketed because the police said, fine, you're going to prosecute us, you're going to second guess us, we'll just step back. We won't do as much. We won't work as much. We won't pull these people over. And you know what happens? Crime goes through the roof. And the people who suffer the most are the very minority communities that the progressive left claims they care about.
All right, I want to stop this argument real quick. And I want to say something, then I want to pick up the conversation again. I can't imagine having black skin and growing up in a racial era where it was that bad, what it was like. I just really can't imagine that. And I'm sorry that happened, but it happened. Now then, we're all trying to make it better. I think we're all trying to make it better. And I thought it was getting better. But all of a sudden, Black Lives Matter shows up. And all these protests are showing up. And all these things are happening that are just very racial oriented, one-sided. Nobody's trying to work together, it doesn't seem like, to try to stop this. If the black NFL players are so upset about this, why don't they work with their teammates and go into the community centers and put some? Franklin, why do they need to take a knee during the national anthem? Why don't they do something? Why don't they do something about it? Why don't they make sure that more of these people in these projects are getting an education? Why don't they work with these kids to get them degrees?
How do you know they don't? That's my question.
Well, let me tell you, most of those kids in the projects think they're going to be an athlete when they grow up. And that's where they go wrong.
Sure.
Now then, if these guys would get in there and work with them and coach with them and help them understand that education is probably the what they need the most. They've got to get this.
Sure.
Then maybe we could get rid of some of these projects. But there's not any work that I've seen.
It's because they're constantly bombarded with the message that they're a victim and that they can't do anything.
That's right. Now, I don't know what we could do to try to help more.
You could quit telling them they're victims.
We're putting dollars, we're putting everything into these things, trying to help them. The more you put in it, the worse it gets.
Oh, we certainly made some mistakes along those ways, for sure.
Well, they've got a professor at one of the colleges is teaching now that telling people that if you work hard, you can succeed is white privilege and racist. So work hard is now racist.
It's just amazing to me that everybody wants to protest. Al Sharpton, do you think he does the blacks any favors? Is he good for the blacks?
I suspect that people want to feel like they're being heard. And if they don't feel like they're being heard, they're going to turn to people who are giving them at least attention. And that's where Al Sharpton's rise in popularity or whatever came from.
Actually, most of it came from making false claims about rape and racism, which were proven false, and not paying his taxes after scamming companies into extortion money.
That's how he made a living, is extortion, I think. He just goes in and threatens.
Absolutely.
Threatens to
Same as
protest.
Jesse Jackson. And amazingly, a lot of his Jesse Jackson's protests against the car manufacturers and the beer distributors ended when his sons got beer distributorships and car dealerships given to them.
Well, you go back to these riots in the streets, and then you see them, they're protesting, and then they're breaking windows out, and they're just looting.
Okay, well, I'm going to go back to what I said last week.
Okay.
All right. I disagree with the way they're choosing to do these national anthem protests. However, those folks are not rioting in the streets. They're not screaming obscenities. They're not breaking windows. They're being totally quiet about something. So as protests go, it's hardly as big a deal
Look,
as we're
what
making
is
out.
Black Lives Matter? What is that?
What is it?
Yeah.
I'm not sure I understand your question.
I'm not sure I understand it, but what does it mean? Black Lives Matter.
Well, it's grounded in a belief that law enforcement in particular, in some places, takes actions that do not seem to value.
It was actually founded in a lie, proven a lie by the Obama Justice Department itself.
But if Black Lives Matter, why don't we get together and let's try to do something about it?
Look, I don't agree with Franklin about the protests. I'm okay with those guys taking a knee. They do have a right to do it, and it is peaceful. But then I'm okay with the owners firing them. There were three Catholic high school football players that were told not to do it. They took a knee. The coach, as soon as they took the knee and the pledge was over, the coach had them stand up, take their jerseys off, and hand them in to him, and he threw them off the field immediately. That's what ought to happen. So you have a right to protest, and they have a right to punish you for it.
We've got a call. Let's take a call. Go ahead, caller. You're live.
I'd like to throw this out. Why George Soros walking free? He has financed a lot of this civil disruption.
Well, you're absolutely right. He finances almost all of it, and his fortune was actually made by sowing civil unrest and collapsing world economies and then profiting off of it.
That's right. Why is he not in jail?
Well, because the media establishment, and the liberals protect him just like they did Harvey Weinstein, because he does the right things by their book.
Anything else, caller?
Ain't about it. It tears me up.
Well, anyway, I'm trying to get to the bottom of things. What could we do to help this situation, you think?
With polarization?
Yes. I mean, I can't imagine, and I said this earlier, I can't imagine growing up with black skin during these racial times and some of the things that happened years ago.
And still do.
Yeah, well.
Things still do happen.
Well,
but it's a matter of whether you are looking at the big picture or whether you're looking for any grievance you can to get out of having to work to improve your life.
I want to be friends with everybody. I don't want any enemies. How do we make that happen in this world?
Let everybody have their say.
Then should we let them kneel for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Well, I don't have any problem with it there. If they want to do that, don't bother me. But I don't watch the NFL anyway.
Okay. All right. Anything else, caller?
That's it.
All right. Thanks. Thanks for calling. Anyway, I think we need to zero in on trying to work together. I'm just tired of these racial things. I thought we were over this. I really did think, and frankly, I'm going to say something you're not going to like, I don't think, but I really thought racial problems were getting a lot better. And when President Obama came into office, I thought that was a great opportunity for him to do some things great, and he absolutely did not. He just made it worse from day one. And I think he's really upset the apple cart now and got things stirred up again. And I'd like to see us do something to undo what he's done.
Did you see President Obama's comments on the flag protest?
Now, what'd he say?
he said that he wished that the players understood how that made soldiers and family members of soldiers feel before they made those decisions.
Good.
But then he also said, but I also understand that in a free society that we can't expect to only hear what we like.
But there's absolutely
no, hold on, and that there are ways of expressing things, and there are hateful ways of doing it, and these are quiet ways of doing it. Now,
look, Franklin, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that statement. It's a good statement. The problem is he created the environment over the last 8 years that led to this situation.
Why didn't he do anything about Chicago during his term with all the violence they had in his own hometown? He didn't make one effort to try to help Chicago with their problems.
What is it you think the federal government can do about that?
Well, a president can do something about it if he'll talk about it.
Well, his chief of staff became the mayor. He could have done almost anything.
I'm just asking you what it is you think the president should have done in Chicago.
I think he should have brought this to the attention of Americans.
I'll give an exact answer. He could have instructed the U.S. attorneys in the area to start prosecuting all gun crimes like they did in Richmond, Virginia, as federal crimes, and all of the people committing gun crimes in Chicago would have immediately been sent to federal penitentiary for federal time. And just like they did in Richmond, you would have seen a massive decrease in the amount of gun crimes.
But then they start talking about the
well, here's a guy who was releasing
the jails full of black people.
Well, right. So that's my point. He made a good statement on this, but he created the environment that has brought us to this point. He's made absolutely race relations are worse after 8 years of him rather than better, and significantly worse.
Do you agree to that, Franklin?
I actually
agree
don't.
With you, John.
No, I don't.
You don't think they're worse? You think they're better?
I don't think they're any different. I think they're a little more public than they were before.
So before Obama, we were having these kneeling things during the national anthem. We were
having lots of racial issues in this country that were not being talked about or addressed. Now, did his election cause people to talk about these issues more? Probably.
Well, Franklin,
did that mean that they weren't there, though?
The polling is against you, because all the polling among blacks and whites, Republicans and Democrats, say race relations are worse after Obama.
Talking about it right now.
Race relations are worse, according to everybody, apparently, except you.
I think they are. I mean, I feel like they are. Do you don't think they're worse, though, Franklin?
No, I don't.
Well, the polling data disagrees.
What can we do to fix it? Last time, I'm going to ask this one more time.
All politics is economic, Steve. All politics is economic.
Does that mean reparations? Is that what you're saying?
No, it means that as long as people feel like they're being pitted against each other, you're going to have these problems, and those problems stem from economics.
I'm glad you said that, because that's what Obama did for 8 years, and the Democrats, they pitted one group against another. Identity politics.
That is the most hypocritical lie ever foisted upon the country. While you listen to the Alex Joneses of the world and the Info Wars and all those people
I don't even know where to
with
find
all this
Alex
blatantly
Jones.
racist conduct.
So
all
now
the time.
I'm a racist. Is that
I
it,
didn't say
Franklin?
anything
Yes,
to
you did. You just did that by association. I have never in my life tuned into an Alex Jones program, but you make that association, then you call him a racist.
Let me back up.
No,
Let me
Franklin.
back up and go to Breitbart,
In
then.
effect, you called me a racist.
You've
which
looked
is
at Breitbart, haven't you?
insulting. No, actually, I don't look at Breitbart
You
either.
brought it in here in the articles and showed them to
No,
me,
I
John.
quoted Breitbart out of other articles, Franklin.
Okay, that's a big difference.
But it doesn't matter, Franklin. You're calling me a racist.
Here's what I'll say to you, John, and I'll say it to you directly.
You can't win a damn
Here's what I'll
argument,
say
Franklin.
to you.
Don't call people names.
Here's what I'll say to you directly, John.
What's that,
If
Franklin?
you wink and nod at the people who are blatant racists, you're giving them an aid
There
cover.
you go. What he just did,
And
once
actually,
again,
John,
was
and
calling
actually,
me a
John,
racist because,
I will
Franklin,
go a little farther with your
why don't
case.
you go a little farther and figure out your facts so you can win an
I'll go a
argument
little
instead
farther
of calling
in
me
your
a
case,
racist?
John. Your reason is a little different from those folks. Your reason is because you'll support anybody who claims to say they're a Republican.
No,
it doesn't matter what they are.
I've paid a lot of price locally for not supporting people who I didn't believe were actually Republicans.
Oh, they were all Republicans you supported, though.
People who didn't on the national level, Franklin. I'd just like you to be able to win an argument every now and then.
Yeah, I'm concerned about that, John.
Well, you'd have to get some facts, and the problem is you're on a fact-free side of the argument.
I would actually have to get out of my bubble and look at the world, unlike you, who lives in this narrowly defined
so that's
fantasy
I'm the
world.
person who brings in tons of research every week where I've looked at the world.
And I see the sources you bring it in
You mean
from,
like the New York
and it's
Times?
rightwingnut.com, usually.
Right.
All right. Break it up. I'm trying to get this thing fixed, not broken. So let's take a break. We'll be right back.
ESPN, one of the hosts is taking fire from the White House press secretary, saying that she should be fired. By Sarah Huckabee Sanders saying she should be fired.
Well, first of all, Sarah should read the Constitution. She has the first right amendment to give her view. We're in a climate now where if you're a football player taking a knee with protest, as in Kaepernick, as in Jamil, where people are being punished for expressing their views. Whether you agree with their views.
You're listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson. We'll be right back after this.
You are listening to WOOP-LP, Cleveland, Tennessee. WOOP FM is a broadcasting service of the Traditional Music Resource Center, and we play America's original music.
Another SOS, and you're stressing, and that's the time to check in. Check into cash, check in. When you have a cash emergency, you check in. We understand the urgency. Check in to get your loans and more. You gotta check in with your check into cash. Sure. Walk in, call in, click in, go all in. Check into cash in, check into cash. Your one-stop money shop. Check into cash.
Hey folks, Glenn here from U.S. Money Shops. If you think all pawn shops are dark and dreary, then you haven't been to U.S. Money Shops. From hard-to-find items to unique jewelry to the latest in electronics, we have it. And guns, we have a huge selection of guns in a variety of colors from a variety of manufacturers. And when you buy any gun at U.S. Money Shops, you get a box of ammo in a case absolutely free. So come see what I'm talking about. Any of our 12 U.S. Money Shops locations in Tennessee and Georgia. Restrictions apply. See store for details.
Buy or sell or buy today. The better way at U.S. Money Shops.
Hello, my name is Andy Figglestaller with Ed Jacobs & Associates. We are an employee benefit and insurance broker in business for the past 20 years. The new healthcare law, also known as Obamacare, has finally arrived. The law is complex and the choices are confusing. You have questions, we have the answers. It is our passion to find cost-effective solutions for every client. The solutions will be different for every person or business. Let our knowledge, experience, and passion go to work for you. Contact us today and let us assist you through this process. Our phone number is 423-473-0202, or you can find us on the web at edjacobs.com.
No dealers allowed.
Jackson Catnapper, family owned and operated in Cleveland since 1933, offering the best with over 70 styles of recliners, sofas, electronic lift chairs, full living room packages. Call Mike now at 961-7239 because Jackson Catnapper now offers sales to the public
every Saturday. That's right, every Saturday.
From 8 in the morning to 1 in the afternoon. Or call Mike at 961-7239. Or go see him
every Saturday
at 1911 King Edward Avenue, just across from the main plant. Jackson Catnapper, family owned and operated in Cleveland since 1933. 961-7239.
No dealers allowed.
See this badge? Of course not. It's radio. It says Trained Comfort Specialist. It means we're expert technicians and as reliable as the trained systems we install, keeping your winters cozy and summers cool. And when you do see this badge, you'll immediately feel more comfortable.
Ready to indulge in trained comfort? Call a Trained Comfort Specialist at Mechanical Systems, 336-5739. High-quality service and installation for more than 30 years.
It's hard to stop a Trained Comfort Specialist.
If you need a little green, Lending Frog is making deals. He'll lend you cash on any kind of wheels. Borrow just a little, or you can borrow big. Lending Frog is a new financial
You're listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson on Whoop FM. Call 423-614-5553 to join in on the conversation. Now, back to Backfire.
All right, we're back live in the studio. I'm going to hit a sore nerve here. John, do you think do you think that Corker needs to resign now?
I don't think he needs to resign. I don't like what's going on. I don't think it helps on either side. Of course, I've said this before. I don't think the president's tweets about, personal attacks really help. But I don't like what Corker said either.
Well, I told you a long time ago, Corker started it.
Well, this time, actually, the president started it. Now, Corker, I think, accelerated it awfully hard. But I do think that the president would be better served if he would quit tweeting personal attacks on people.
Steve Bannon says that Corker is part of the
elite,
the 8 or whatever. There's several senators that are Republican that are basically against Trump no matter what.
Well, that's really hard to swing, because I was actually mad at Corker during the primaries for actually signing on board with Trump. He was one of the first ones that signed on board and supported him, actually came out and bragged on his do you remember the foreign policy speech? Corker gave rave reviews to that, and a lot of people weren't that impressed with that speech.
Mm-hmm. Well, what's been interesting to me is how few United States senators have been critical of Corker for his comments.
But they also haven't come forward and joined him.
No, I understand that. Those are the ones that are going to run for re-election.
And by the way,
it's pretty telling that they didn't rush out and condemn him.
And by the way, you mentioned Steve Bannon.
Yeah.
If you follow that interview with Steve Bannon, he said that he wanted to defeat every single Republican up there except one.
Ted
Only
Cruz.
one Republican
Everyone except
was
Ted
good
Cruz.
enough for him.
No, I think
he said that point blank.
I've listened to several of his what he said, and he's talking about the 8.
He said every single one.
He said every one of them,
Well,
and he said
Ted
specifically,
Cruz is the only...
"I'm declaring war on the Republican establishment."
Well, and I heard him say that there's about 7 or 8 that really need to go.
I told you in here a few months ago that you could make a pretty good argument that we're seeing the destruction of both major American political parties, and Bannon is being out front about it.
But Dianne Feinstein announced that she was running for re-election, and the left has now gone apoplectic on her. She's not liberal enough, and they're gonna mount primary challenges to her. And she's, by our standard, she's extremely liberal, but she's sort of a old world Teddy Kennedy type liberal.
She'll be 91, I think, when her office term is up. I think I read that somewhere. If she runs again, she'll be 91 when her term's up.
I don't know.
Yeah. Anyway, Steve Bannon, I mean, the more that goes on with Bannon, to me, it's more interesting that he is taking on the swamp. That's what he calls it. He said the swamp. And really and truly, the swamp is both sides. And one of the things I read about what he was talking about is these politicians that just keep running for office and keep running for office, they've got millions of dollars in their campaign funds through the years. They've reaped millions of dollars. Then if somebody wants to run against them, there's not enough money to fight them off. That these guys have all this money and they have all this stuff they've done for years. Go ahead, Franklin.
Well,
now, this is Democratic.
Of course it is, but as
Republican.
I keep saying, there's too much money flowing into political campaigns.
I agree. John, do you agree
that
with
applies
that?
to everybody.
Do you agree with that?
Actually, I'm looking for something. I actually printed something off kind of about this that I thought you would appreciate. Michigan has the toughest, I'm going to have to do this by memory because I can't put my hands on it. Michigan has the toughest term limit laws in the country. And this election, of course, the Detroit newspaper was writing an article about how terrible this was going to be. They were going to have a turnover of about around 80% because of the term limits. And that's actually not as bad as 2010. They had a higher turnover, something like, I think it was 18 out of 25
What
senators.
are their term limits? How many years?
14.
14 years.
Well, I think, let me find that. I've got it here. So,
what do you think a term limit should be? 2 terms?
For what?
Or, well, let's say for Senate.
2 terms for Senate isn't
12,
necessarily
that's 12
bad.
years, isn't it?
That's 12 years, but, you know.
That long enough? No, they're out of good ideas in 12 years. They ain't got anything to offer.
Here it is. I'm sorry.
There is an argument to be made that, you know, a lot of these folks move into some particular area of expertise while they're there. Some people become experts in foreign relations.
And that's how that's how to make money on the side.
Actually, this Michigan thing's interesting for that, okay?
Yeah.
Because that's the actual argument against term limits, is that you're turning over too much power to the lobbyists, because the lobbyists are the ones that understand the issues. But here's the point. You know who's leading the charge against term limits? The lobbyists. Of course. The same lobbyists who say that term limits give too much power wants to do away with term limits. Well, if they gave too much power to the lobbyists, they wouldn't be against them. The problem is, in Michigan, for example, this year, 70% of the state senators will be forced out of office and 20% of the representatives. But, now listen to this. This is interesting. Because of that, guess which state ranks number 1 in election competitiveness? Michigan. 100% contested races. Every office holder has a contested race in Michigan. So term limits have actually led Michigan to be the most competitive election state in the country.
Do you think, are you behind Bannon with what he's trying to do?
I don't like Steve Bannon. I like term limits, but I don't like Steve Bannon.
Do you like what he's trying to do, clean up the swamp?
Actually, my problem with Bannon is he's not a Republican. He's not really a conservative on a lot of issues. He's conservative on some issues, but he's actually closer to Bernie Sanders on some others. I'm not a populist by measure. So,
do you agree with what I said a minute ago, that the longer these guys stay in office,
I'm for term limits. I don't have a problem with term limits.
All they do is build up their nest eggs with money.
Well, here's my take on the term limits that I think is a better way to look at this. The problem with term limits is, I'm a dentist. If I get elected and I go to Nashville or Washington, and I can only be there for 8 years.
12 years, let's say 12.
Well, okay. I'm going to hire someone to help work with me and run my office, and in 12 years, I'm coming home to my dental practice. So every time I vote on a law, in the back of my mind, I'm going, how is this going to affect the economy? How is this going to affect business? How is this going to affect my ability to earn a living when I get home? If I go to Washington or Nashville and I sell my practice and I leave it and I say, okay, from now on, I'm going to be a paid, government person. When I'm voting on these bills, I don't care how it affects my business or the economy. All I care about is, does it get me reelected? So it completely changes the focus of what you're trying to accomplish if you're not going back to the private sector.
Well, John, in your case, you'd be retired time you get back, so you could sell your practice.
Granddad worked until he was 88.
Oh, I know. All right, let's take a break. We've got a guest in the studio. And I'd like to welcome in the studio this morning Steve Crump, the district attorney, 10th Judicial District DA, I believe is the way your title is. Right?
That's me.
Well, you're looking awful spiffy this morning.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Filmed it this way.
Anyway, I asked John if he'd get talk to Steve and ask to come in this morning to talk about the headlines in the papers. It's a great headline. Y'all got a battle going on the opioids. Is that how I pronounce that?
That's right. You got it right.
Okay. The drugs. Why don't you go ahead and just tell us a little bit about what's going on right now with your lawsuit?
Sure. Well, and thanks very much. I appreciate the opportunity to come in. I guess 5 weeks ago now, we announced from my office a new initiative related to opioid abuse. In my opinion, and frankly, I think most law enforcement officials, that's the number one public safety issue that we face right now. And we can't approach this problem the same way that we've approached it for the last 30 years. We've taken basically the same approach or variations on the same approach. And so we, at least in this district, are looking at other ways to combat that. I'm thankful that sounds like some of our statewide folks, particularly Beth Harwell, who just recently came out with her own report from a task force that she had impaneled, said much of the same things, came to me the same conclusions that I had. It was nice that I got out there before she did, but nonetheless, the ideas are the same, and I don't think any of them are new, but they are common sense. And so it focused on three things. Education certainly is important. Treatment is going to be an important function of this, but accountability, which is something that prosecutors are typically, I think, associated with. But we've looked in a little different direction than just your traditional drug dealer. We're also looking at both educating and prosecuting healthcare professionals who don't do what they should be doing as a professional member of society. But also we are seeking to hold the drug companies accountable, and in particular Purdue Pharmaceuticals, who have provided the majority of the opioids to our district, and or at least a large portion of them, and have led to many of these problems and profited from them. So it's time that they pay back into the community what they've taken out.
I was reading the story, or saw this somewhere. A high school student just passed away, but he was playing high school football, sophomore, broke his ankle, and was put on some kind of opioid drugs or whatever, I guess.
Yes.
He ended up getting hooked, and I think he ended up dead just recently. So,
yes. Well, and that's what's scary about this, is that we have this mindset about drug abuse, that it's some dirty, unemployed, stoner who goes to a dark, out of the way corner of some big city and does something illegal. And in fact, when it comes to opioids, it's people you go to church with. It's people that you shop with in the grocery store. It's the people who coach your kids. It's your kid. It happens not because somebody seeks to do something illegal necessarily, which has been traditionally what we've dealt with in law enforcement, but many times this starts from something totally innocent, something where somebody is doing exactly what a doctor or somebody told them to do.
Back problems.
Absolutely, knee problems. 53% of the 53% of the overdose deaths in Tennessee this year will be caused from medications that come out of a medicine cabinet. We will lose more Tennesseans to overdoses this year than homicides and traffic accidents combined.
Senior citizens part of this?
Oh, absolutely.
Big part of it.
That's another one of the real issues when it comes to opioids. The age spectrum, there's not an age spectrum. It's from middle schoolers all the way to the elderly. The day that we announced this opioid initiative, I got a call from the mother of a 16-year-old who overdosed, who said, I lost my son to this, and I certainly hope that you will keep doing what you're doing. That same day, I got an email from a friend of mine whose 73-year-old mother overdosed because she didn't understand a change in her medication. And so that's why education is such an important component of this. A middle schooler or a high schooler who has to have surgery, a middle schooler who has to have oral surgery, a high schooler who plays sports or, perhaps is a dancer, can fall victim to this. And the elderly, our senior citizens, when their medication is changed, even though it may have been explained completely, and they may have, it's very easy for them to go back to their old habit of taking whatever dosage they took before. So we have to be vigilant, and we have to get into the schools, and we need to tell folks that there are these issues, and then we have to get out into the community centers and into our civic organizations and tell them. But I don't want to overlook the fact that a lot of this is, unfortunately, particularly in younger folks, the product of illegal behavior. One of the problems that we see in this community and every other community are what are called skittle parties, where folks will go to their medicine cabinet, kids will go to their medicine cabinets, they'll get whatever their parents have in there, they'll bring them to a party, and everybody will dump it into a bowl, and then everybody just kind of rummages around and grabs something out of the bowl and takes something with them. They have no idea what they're taking, they have no idea what its effect will be, they have no idea.
How could they, how would, to me, to take medicine that you wouldn't know how it would even affect you would be just absolutely crazy.
Well, sure. And but let me tell you this, part of the other issue is one of the fastest growing segments of society where we're seeing this are teenage girls, because they can take one pill and achieve the same result that they would have if they drank 5, 6, 7, 8 beers and not have to worry about weight gain, which is both terrifying and heartbreaking, but it's one of the areas that we see this problem.
What can we do to help? What, as a community, what can we do?
Well, I think there are a number of things. Unlike many areas in law enforcement, there is not a that fly is not long for this world. There is a component that has to be the society and has to be our community. Ask me to come speak to your civic groups. Ask us to come speak to your garden club. Ask us to come speak to, because there is no organization that is not going to be touched by this.
Let me say something about the culture that he's talking about.
Okay.
As a healthcare professional, one of the problems for us is we are held to a standard of care. So he mentioned oral surgery, for example. Now, I can tell you, years ago, people had teeth taken out. People had wisdom teeth taken out. They didn't get opioids for pain. They got aspirin, or when ibuprofen came along, they got ibuprofen. As a culture, and I'll get in trouble for saying this, we're becoming kind of sissies. We want everything to be completely, I don't want to feel anything. Used to be, I don't want to hurt. Now it's, I don't want to feel anything. Well, the problem is, it takes different and stronger medicines to do that. So a lot of these healthcare professionals are also worried about getting sued if the patient says, you didn't give me something and I hurt. So as a culture, we've got to toughen up a little bit and understand that there are downsides to these things. And maybe you need to suck it up a little bit and not expect to be zonked out.
Isn't that the heart of the lawsuit you described, General? The fact that the drug companies in particular began promoting these opioid drugs and literally telling the physicians that they were not going to be as addictive as other drugs.
They did.
That's right. That they downplayed, and in fact, Purdue Pharmaceuticals, one of the reasons that they are the
Tell them what prescription drugs we're talking about primarily.
Hydrocodone, oxycodone, to some extent fentanyl, and certainly there's a whole gamut of them. Unfortunately, there are tons of them. But to go to John's point, we passed in Tennessee several years ago what was called the Intractable Pain Act, which required a physician, and this is part of the issue, required a physician to prescribe somebody an opioid if they came in with nonspecific, non-diagnosable pain. They were required by law to prescribe an opioid. And when you combine that with the fact that reimbursements under Medicare, TennCare, all these other particular government programs are based upon patient satisfaction in part, and based upon somebody not coming back to see you within 30 days with the same condition. Well, what happens is they prescribe you a 45-day supply of opioids, and they give you opioids that you may not need because they know that when Medicare calls you or TennCare calls you and says, how was your visit? And they say, well, the doctor didn't give me anything for pain. Cuts down the amount of reimbursement. Now, let me say this. The vast majority of physicians in our community do it right. That they do it right. But we've got to, in some ways, even retrain them to tell them to tell their patients, look, here's what you need to do for your pain. Take a combination of ibuprofen and acetaminophen. It's going to do far more to lessen your pain and shorten the duration of that pain than opioid. Opioid treats the brain. It doesn't treat anything related to the body. It's an end of life. It's for what a cancer patient who is facing the end of life. It treats the brain. It makes the brain think you're not hurting. It makes the brain not care if you're hurting.
How does Tennessee rank relative to our neighbors in terms of the number of opioid prescriptions per capita?
In the Southeast, we're the number one. In the country, we're number two. This year there will be 7.8 million prescriptions for opioids written in Tennessee. That's 1.2 for every man, woman, and child in this state.
What is unique about Tennessee that has produced that?
Well, TennCare had a big impact on that.
I think I think the biggest thing was the Intractable Pain Act. I think that certainly caused it. But I don't know that you could tie it to any one particular thing. You hear people who say that.
Well, I have heard that a factor is that we're on the border of so many other states, which opened up the possibility for people getting prescriptions in multiple locations.
That's correct. And particularly in southeast Tennessee, where you have North Georgia and North Carolina right on our border, and that certainly has contributed locally to our situation. In fact, it's interesting sometimes when we end up shutting down a pain clinic or something like that, or a doctor who's over-prescribing, we will first get onto that because we look in their parking lot, and there will be cars from North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Missouri. We had one in Polk County that had them from as far away as Kentucky, Missouri, and Oklahoma.
Well, I mean, I know how we could stop that, but I'll tell you about it after the show.
Okay, all right.
Education, you said, is a part. Are we in the school systems with this?
We are, and we particularly, my office is particularly partnered with a couple of organizations. We're looking to do more with one. We're doing a lot with one already, The Bridge, which is an organization that is very big in the county school system and is beginning to work in the city school system, and then the On Point organization, which is a student leadership. You know, what we've got to do with kids is we've got to make it cooler for them to save another child's life than to party with them. We've got to make it as a peer thought that they're going to stop this rather than promote this. And so education is huge. We are in the schools. We're going to try to be more in the schools. I look forward to every opportunity. We're looking out of the box at things we've never looked at in law enforcement, things that the DA's office has never looked at, in ways to educate the public about these dangers. We'll go anywhere, anytime, to any place and speak to 1, 2, or 1,000 people about this.
Isn't that part of the issue, though, that so many of these folks who are battling this addiction, as you pointed out, did not start out with any illegal intent in mind?
Absolutely.
And so traditional ways of looking at prosecution don't seem to work in that regard, because by the time people realize they're committing crimes, or they're already addicted.
Well, the potential in Tennessee is for 1 of every 7 Tennesseans to be somewhere on the opioid abuse spectrum, from either taking it legally and following doctor's instructions and having no problem to an overdose death. And somewhere on that spectrum, 1 out of every 7 Tennesseans falls. You think about if we had to build enough cells for 1 out of every 7 Bradley Countyans, that's 15,000 jail beds, and I'd need another 30 prosecutors just in Bradley County. It's just not, you can't prosecute your way out.
I'm going to give you an example how I've witnessed this personally. My mother, last few years I've taken care of her. She passed away recently, but several years ago she had very chronic back problems.
Yes.
And she was in Tenova Hospital for several weeks with this excruciating pain. And finally, they ended up putting her on some of these pain medications and so forth, and she went home. Well, her husband had passed away, so I was having to hire help to help take care of her at home at that time. And she had this pain medication, and she kept getting worse instead of better.
Right.
And, you know, it just kept going on and on and on, and I went back to the pain specialist, and I won't even mention their name, but they were good. I liked them a lot. But he came out to me and he said, you know, she's taking an awful lot of pain medicines. He said, a lot more than somebody should be needing to take at her age level, especially. He says, are you sure she's getting this medicine? Come to find out, there was one of her carekeepers stealing the medicine.
Absolutely. That is not uncommon
unbelievable.
At all. That is not uncommon at all, unfortunately.
I mean, there are a group of people who clearly have a defined medical need for these significant pain medications. The problem is expanding that pool too far.
I want to give you a follow-up to that. She was on all this pain medicine. Well, she finally fell and broke her hip. Then we had to have surgery done, and she goes into the rehab and all this stuff. Later on, I moved her into assisted living rather than moving back home. And she got completely off. She was on no pain medication. And she lost a lot of weight, but she was on no pain medication and felt great.
Mm-hmm.
It was amazing after she broke her hip how that.
It's been amazing how many people who I've been dealing with have called me to complain that if I follow through on this, that they can't live. Their words, not mine. I can't live without this, and that's really the saddest conversation I have when there certainly I'm not minimizing those who actually need this, but there are an awful lot of people who unfortunately now need it not for a medical reason, but because for a psychological or other addictive process.
What is crack? Is crack?
No, it is not.
It's a different deal, right?
It's a totally different deal, yeah.
Because crack, you can see crack addicts. I mean, you can pick them out of a crowd. Can you pick these people out of a crowd?
Not always, but sometimes.
Sometimes you can, but what happens is when they lose their ability, and I'll tell you what really frightens me about all this is that from this is going to come another wave of heroin addicts. Because when we cut down on the ability of people to get opioids, they're going to turn to heroin. And the heroin of today is far different than it was in the 60s, 70s, and 80s.
It's also less expensive than
It's
the
less
opioids.
expensive.
It's a form of crack, isn't it?
No, it's a different item.
It's the same root drug though as the opioid.
That's right. And so the effects are the same. The way they're processing it now makes it much more potent, much more longer lasting. And what will end up happening is some of the zombies that you read about in other cities, these big cities, will soon be in downtown Cleveland, where people are simply so overcome with the intoxication of the heroin that they have no idea who they are, where they are, or what they're doing. And it's eventually, unfortunately, we'll probably see that here.
Look, Steve, these are depressants. The methamphetamine is like cocaine. It's a stimulant.
Yeah.
That's why you see them going crazy, berserk, and shooting up a place. You see these people slumping around. Eventually they're not able to go to work. Mm-hmm. They lose their jobs. That makes it worse.
Yeah. About 70% of the crime I deal with, or that my office deals with, is related to some form of substance abuse. And I would say 60% of that is opioid or other things like that.
Again, I'm going to get cultural on us again, because part of this is my dad, when he got older, at one point he fell at our house and broke a bunch of ribs, and they wanted to give him Lortab, hydrocodone. He wouldn't take it. Now, he actually probably needed it, but we have lost the risk aversion in our culture. You know, my dad was terrified of becoming, now he's 82 years old, and he's worried about becoming an addict on these things. But what we've done with these kids for a generation is we've protected them from the negative consequences of all these bad actions. We've given them a trophy for participating. And so they now have an attitude about life that it doesn't matter. I should do whatever I want to do to make me feel good. I should have what I want. And so they take these drugs without any thought about the consequences that it might do to them. And that's part of the problem. I don't know how you break that, because that's a cultural norm.
What about morphine? How does it fall in?
It's in that same group.
It's in the same group. And in fact, morphine was the original opioid. Morphine really, truly is most often seen in end-of-life scenarios. It's where it's most often prescribed. Or I say it's most often prescribed. It's where it was originally as a medical tool was used. But
now, Steve, as bad as people react to the word morphine, OxyContin effectively is morphine. I mean, that's what you're taking.
Well, and we're now to the point where we're seeing opioids of even more power than any of these. One of the DTFs over in West Tennessee recently made a stop and seized 22 pounds of illegal fentanyl, which is another form of that. Now, 22 pounds, you think that's a lot, but then you think, gosh, how much could that be? That's enough fentanyl to kill every man, woman, and child in West Tennessee. Almost 2.5 million Tennesseans. That's enough to overdose on a lethal level 2.5 million Tennesseans in 22 pounds. That'll give you an idea.
A shoebox full or something?
It's bigger than a shoebox, but it's
think of large Band-Aids.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
It's transdermal most of the time.
Yeah.
It's a skin patch.
And so as as the need has increased for greater and stronger analgesics or painkillers, we have upped the ante with each new drug that's come out. I remember when we first started seeing OxyContin, people overdosed on that because they didn't understand it was different than hydrocodone. Fentanyl is so powerful that if some of it gets on your shirt and you just go to wipe it off, you'll overdose. We've had a number of first responders who no longer, first responders no longer.
It gets on your hands?
Yeah,
it's absorbed.
It's absorbed transdermally. And an officer over in Middle Tennessee actually they had done some sort of, I'm not sure exactly what they did, but he got some fentanyl on his uniform, and one of the other officers came over and just brushed it off. He was rushed to the hospital and almost died. So what we're dealing with now, we're not just, now, obviously you don't see that every day, and you have to go out of your way to find something like that. But the idea that these are getting stronger and stronger and stronger.
Is President Trump doing anything about this yet? No, he's talked about it.
He's talked about it. Attorney General Jeff Sessions has designated actually the Eastern District of Tennessee as one of 12 federal districts across the country with such an opioid problem that they've created an opioid fraud and abuse task force here on a federal level. So, yes, the president is doing something. The Attorney General specifically has stepped in to do something. I believe you'll see federal action from the Congress this year, both in terms of dealing with physicians and dealing with prescriptions, but also hopefully addressing the need for treatment. We're going to have to pay money to treat the existing generation.
It's cheaper than incarceration.
That's right. We can educate the generations that are coming, and we can deal with the illegal folks, but we have got to treat the generation who is suffering with this addiction. Regardless of how they got there, we've got to treat them.
Children being involved in this?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, through birth?
Oh, sure. Tennessee is one of the leading states for neonatal abstinence syndrome, which is basically a drug-addicted baby. We had a statute that made it illegal for a mother to do that, and we could get involved, make her get treatment, make her follow a safety care plan, and then the legislature decided that it was not, that they didn't want to get involved in that and let that bill sunset. So now it's perfectly legal for you to poison your baby and have it drug-addicted. While I have a great number of friends in the Tennessee legislature, I cannot express how disappointed I am at our elected leaders that decided that a baby's life was not any more important than that.
Especially in a Republican state.
Yes. Fortunately, the folks around here were for that and tried their best. Our local legislators were all for that, but as a state and as a Republican Party, I'm ashamed.
Steve, is there anything that anybody can do to help that's listening today?
Yes, get involved. If you know somebody has this problem, get involved with that person. Try to talk to them. Be active in their life. Give them everything, every type of support to go get help that you can. Ask me to come speak.
Where would they get help?
Well, there are all kinds of places they can get help. It can be as simple as going to the health department. The health department will refer you to if you don't have the ability to go see a doctor, you don't have the ability to do other things, go to the health department and say, I've got this problem, and they will give you, besides giving you tips on how to control your addiction, they will also get you set up with somebody who can help you. Start there. If you don't know where that is, look in the phone book and call my office. We've got a list of providers that we can give you.
Is there anything they can be given that can help them come off of it? Sometimes there's some, like a sedative.
There is, but the problem is that's become a cottage industry, and they just as soon keep you on that prescription as another one. That's really the problem. Yeah, there's methadone and there are other things like methadone, but what we really see is just people who end up taking that instead of, you just change the drug and change the doctor, and I'm not sure how effective it is.
I'd like to send an invitation to you.
Okay.
Cleveland Boys and Girls Club.
Anytime, anywhere. You just tell me when to be there, and I'll be there, and I'll explain it to whoever will listen.
All right. I guess we're out of time. I'd like to stay and talk some more. We just barely got into all my notes I took.
Well, make a note next time. I'd like to know why the courthouse burned.
They didn't have a
There
fire.
doesn't seem to be a lot of news coming out on why the courthouse burned.
Well, I heard it referred to yesterday as mysteriously burned.
Yeah,
I'm not sure how it mysteriously burned, but
Alex Jones will do a segment on it this week.
without a shirt.
Somebody told me they didn't have any fire alarms in there. Is there truth to that?
I don't know. It'd be nice to know.
That wasn't quite correct.
It's not.
The question is whether the fire alarms were hooked up to the 911 call that's supposed to be, so that the call goes out to alert somebody that there's an alarm going off inside the courthouse. Fortunately,
before it burns the whole building.
Fortunately, a hardworking young lawyer was in her office that morning and happened to look out the window and see smoke coming out the door, and she called the fire department.
Well, that's good. Steve Crump, you're doing a wonderful job.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
Keep up the good work. All right, guys, I'm going to be gone next week, and I'm hoping to have a really good fill-in host for you. So if not, Daniel will take over. All right?
You're saying Daniel wouldn't be a really good?
No, Daniel. No, I'm saying Daniel is good. I'm saying Daniel is good, and he may end up very well doing it. But I've got somebody in mind I think would be a good host.
Be careful, a shrewd engineer could do a lot of damage to you around here.
All right, that's it for today. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye, folks.
You've been listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson, John Stanberry, and